Today we are going to begin with the lesson number 15 of your class 8 English, that is the dusk school. So let's begin with this lesson. Normal Godspy sat on a bench in a corner by the high. Norman Godspy कहाँ बैठे थे? एक bench पे बैठे थे corner में. किसमें? Of the Hyde Park. With his back to fenced area of grass. The fenced area of grass उनके back पे थे वो. Planted with bush. It was dusk. शाम का टाइम था, about 30 minutes past 6. मतलब 6:30 हो गए थे. On an early March evening. मार्च की इवनिंग में the atmosphere was a mixture of failing daylight. Atmosphere कैसा? एक falling daylight थी, from pale moonlight and a light from the street lamps a little distance away. street lamps की light आई थी थोड़ी दूर से. On the bench by his side sat an elderly gentleman. कौन बैठा था? एक elderly gentleman बैठे उनके साइड में. He had the expression of a defeated person. एक ऐसा expression था एक हारे हुए person का, who refused to admit his defeat, जो अपनी defeat को refuse कर रहे थे. His clothes were neither expensive nor new. उनके ना तो clothes expensive थे ना ही ज़्यादा नए थे. As he got up to go, Godspy imagined him to be a man in whom no one was particularly interested. जैसे उठे और जाने लगे तो Godspy ने उन्हें imagine करा कि एक मैन है जिसमें कोई भी इंटरेस्टेड नहीं है, either at home और ना ही घर पे ना ही बाहर. As his figure disappeared slowly in the shadow, जैसे उनकी figure खत्म हुई slowly shadow में, his place on the bench was taken almost immediately by a young man. इतनी देर में कोई एक और मैन आके बैठ गया वहाँ पे, very well dressed but no more cheerful. मतलब well dressed था but ज़्यादा cheerful नहीं था than the man who had sat there before. As if to emphasize the fact that he was deeply troubled, कि ऐसा fact है कि बहुत ज़्यादा deeply troubled है and unhappy है. The newcomer uttered a curse or two as he threw himself into the seat. So you don't seem in a very good temper. तुम अच्छे temper में नहीं लग रहे. said Godspy. Godspy ने बोला कि तुम अच्छे temper में नहीं लग रहे. Judging that he was expected to show sympathy, कि वो sympathy दिखाएगा. The young man turned to him with a look of great frankness. मतलब young man ने उसकी तरफ great frankness दिखाई, which put Godspy instantly on his guard. मतलब Godspy जिससे मतलब एकदम careful हो गए, prepared हो गए, कुछ चीज गलत होने वाली है, something difficult. You would not be of good temper if you were in the fix that I am in, he said. I have done the silliest thing I have ever done in my life. मैंने बहुत silliest thing करी है अपनी लाइफ में जो मैंने पहले कभी नहीं की थी. Yes, said Godspy without much enthusiasm. Yes बोला Godspy ने, ज़्यादा enthusiasm नहीं दिखाया. I came up to London this afternoon. मैं लंदन आया हूँ आज ही दोपहर में, intending to stay at the Patagonian Hotel in Berkshire. Intention था मेरा रोकने का वहाँ पे Patagonian Hotel में Berkshire में स्क्वायर में. Continued the young man. When I got there, I found that the hotel had been pulled down some weeks ago. And a cinema theater had been put in its place. कि होटल तो की जगह पे एक सिनेमा थिएटर खुल गया है वहाँ पे. The taxi driver recommended me to another hotel some way off. टैक्सी ड्राइवर ने मुझे रिकमेंड किया दूसरे होटल पे. I went there. मैं वहाँ गया. I just sent a letter to my people giving them the address. अपने लोगों को मैंने अपना एड्रेस दिया. And then I went to buy some soap. मैं कुछ soap खरीदने गया. I had forgotten to pack and I hate using होटल सोप. मैं पैक करना भूल गया था, मुझे पसंद नहीं होटल के सोप यूज करना. Then I strolled about a bit. I had a drink at a bar. मैंने एक ड्रिंक ली एक बार में and looked at shops. And when I thought of turning my steps back to the hotel, so मैं होटल जा रहा था वापस, I suddenly realized that I did not remember its name or even the street it was in. मेरे को तो होटल का नेम ही याद नहीं है और रास्ते भी नहीं पता कि वो कहाँ पे है. Now that's a nice situation for a fellow to be in. एक मतलब एक अच्छी सिचुएशन है. Who has not any friends? जिसका कोई फ्रेंड नहीं है ना कोई कनेक्शन है लंदन में. I am without any money, came out with only a shilling on me. मेरे पे कोई पैसा भी नहीं, मैं खाली एक शिलिंग के साथ आया हूँ अपने साथ. शिलिंग means a British coin, not in use. जो British coin है कोई यूज में नहीं है यहाँ पे. But which went in buying the soap, जो मतलब soap खरीदने में चला गया and drink में चला गया. So here I am wandering about with 2 pence in my pocket. अब मेरी पॉकेट में सिर्फ 2 pence है. Nowhere to go for the nowhere to go for the night. There was meaningful pause after the story had been told. एक pause आया. I suppose you think I have made up an impossible कॉक एंड बुल स्टोरी फॉर यू. मेरे को लगता है मैंने तुम्हारे लिए कॉक एंड बुल स्टोरी ला दी. मतलब a story that is unlikely to be true, said the young man presently in a hard voice. Not at all possible, said Godspy carefully. Not at all possible. I remember doing exactly the same thing once in foreign city. मैंने एक बार एक सेम चीज करी थी foreign city में, and on that occasion there was two of us. जब तो हम दो थे साथ में. Luckily, we remember that hotel was on a sort of canal. हमें एकदम याद आया कि होटल का था sort of canal में था. So when we came across the canal, we were able to make our way back to the hotel. जब हम canal में आए तो हमने अपना रास्ता अपने होटल में ढूंढ लिया था. The youth brightened up a little on hearing this. मतलब looked happy. जो youth था मतलब एकदम से happy हो गया था ये सोच के. In a foreign city, I would not mind so much. मैं ज़्यादा mind नहीं करूँगा. He said one could go to one's console and get required for help from him. So his one own land one is far more helpless. तो एक और एक आया है जो यहाँ पे helpless feel कर रहा है. And if one gets into a fix like this, unless I can find some decent chap to swallow my story and lend me some money, I seem likely to spend the night on the bank of the Thames. मैं अपनी night spend कर दूँगा bank of the Thames में. I am glad, however, that you don't think the story totally improbable. मेरे को लगता है कि तुमने ये story totally improbable नहीं सोची. I heat you a great deal of warmth into the last remark. A great deal of warmth दिया एक last remark में. Thus, he perhaps to indicate his hope that Godspy himself might to be a such decent chap. So, of course, said Godspy story. Of course, Godspy ने बोला, the weak point of your story is that you can show me the soap. You cannot show me. Weak point ये है कि तुम मुझे soap नहीं दिखा रहे. The young man sat forward hurriedly. Young man एकदम आगे होके बैठा. Fell rapidly in the pocket of his overcoat. एकदम अपना हाथ डाला overcoat में and then jumped to his feet. एकदम अपने खड़ा हो गया. I must have lost it, he muttered angrily. मैंने पक्का उसे खो दिया है. To lose as well as a cake of soap on the same afternoon suggests willful carelessness. क्या suggest करती है? Willful means intentional careless है तुम्हारी, said Godspy. But the young man did not wait to hear the end of this remark. Young man ने ज़्यादा wait नहीं करा. He hurried away down the path. वो path पे भागा गया. His hand held knife with an expression of well-practiced anger and pride. It was a pity thought Godspy to himself. एक pity thought था. The bit about going out by one's own soap was the own convincing part of the whole story, and yet it was just that little detail that brought him to grief. It had, if he had the brilliant forethought to provide himself, इसमें like उसको अपना खुद का अगर वो केयरफुल प्लानिंग करता वो पहले से ही to provide himself with a newly bought cake of soap, he would have been a genius in his particular profession. वो पक्का genius हो जाता अपने profession में. With these thoughts, Godspy rose to go. Godspy उठा और जाने लगा. As he did so, he gave a cry of surprise and anxiety. एकदम से cry दिया उसने anxiety और surprise का. Lying on the ground by the side of a bench was a small packet. एक पैकेट पड़ा था bench के side में. It had obviously fallen out of the young man. ये young man के कोट से गिरा होगा. When he threw himself down on the seat, in another moment, Godspy was rushing along the half-dark path. वो भागा गया half-dark path में, anxiously looking for youthful figure in a light overcoat. कि youthful figure को देख रहा था एक light overcoat में. He had nearly given up the search when he caught sight of a young man. एकदम से दिखता है वो young man standing uncertainly on the border of the road. जो border of the road पे खड़ा है. Evidently trying to decide which way to go. वो decide कर रहा है कि मैं किधर जाऊँ. When Godspy called him, he turned sharply with an expression of challenge. वो एकदम sharply turn करा एक expression उसने दिया challenge का. The important witness to the truth of your story has now appeared. जो important witness था वो appear हो गया, said Godspy, holding out the cake of soap. It must have slipped out of your overcoat pocket. वो पक्का slip हो गया तुम्हारे overcoat pocket से. When you sat down on the seat, I saw it on the ground after you left. जब तुम बैठे थे सीट पे पक्का वो निकल गया है और जब तुम चले गए मैंने वो जब देखा. You must excuse my earlier disbelief. earlier जो मैंने तुम पे यकीन नहीं करा उसे excuse कर देना. But appearances were really rather against you. Now, if the loan of sovereign is any good to you. Now, the young man replied by taking the coin hastily and pocketing it. Coin लिया और अपनी pocket में डाला. here is my card with my address. ये मेरा कार्ड है एड्रेस के साथ. Continued Godspy ने बोला you can return the money any day. this week तुम इस हफ्ते में कभी भी मनी रिटर्न कर सकते हो. And here is the soap. ये रहा soap. Don't lose it again. फिर से मत खोना इसे. It's been a good friend to you. So lucky thing you're finding it, said the youth, and then his finding it's difficult to speak. So he uttered a word. उसने एक चीज बोली. Two of thanks and hurried away in the direction of Knightsbridge. वो मतलब डायरेक्शन में चले गए Knightsbridge के. Poor boy, he nearly broke down. Said Godspy to himself. Poor boy, ये पक्का टूट गया होगा. Godspy ने अपने आप से बोला. I'm not surprised. मैं surprised नहीं हूँ. I must have been such a great relief to him. मैं पक्का एक अच्छी रिलीफ रहूंगा उसके लिए. It's lesson to me not to be too clever in judging people. ये मेरे लिए लेसन है कि मुझे जल्दी से लोगों को जज नहीं करना चाहिए, तेज नहीं बनना चाहिए by circumstances. As Godspy walked back to his seat in the park, जैसे वो सीट पे बैठने गया, he saw an elderly gentleman looking and feeling with his hands beneath the bench. एक elderly gentleman देखा जो hands beneath the bench में all around को झूल रहा था. Godspy recognized him as the man who had sat there before the young man. Godspy ने recognize करा उस man को, उसकी तरह जो पहले यहाँ बैठा था. Have you lost anything, sir? He asked. क्या आपको कोई कुछ यहाँ पे खो दिया है, sir? Yes, sir. A cake of soap. Yes, sir. A cake of soap. मैंने यहाँ पे खो दिया है. So the soap was the of the young man that was before sitting over there. Now let's solve the exercises. Think and answer. Norman Godspy sat on a bench in a corner of a national park, public park, Hyde Park. The young man turned to him with a look of great expression, frankness, sympathy, all of these. The young man was intending to stay at the Patagonian Hotel in Park Square in Berkshire Square. A dash had been put in the place of hotel, cinema. It was a pity, thought Dash to himself, young man, Norman Godspy. It was pity, thought Norman Godspy. Now let's solve the fill in the blanks. Norman Godspy sat on a bench in a corner of the park. Godspy found a dash of soap on the ground. Cake. The young man claimed he intended to stay at a dash hotel, Patagonian. Dash thought the weak point of young man's story, Norman Godspy. Godspy gave the young man Dash to help in his predicament, money. Godspy was sitting in a park. Now let's do the true false. Godspy was sitting in a park during the morning. वो morning में बैठे था false. Godspy is convinced by the young man's story at first false. The elderly gentleman was looking for a lost gold coin. False. The young man who sat next to Godspy was cheerful and happy. The young man who sat next to Godspy was cheerful and happy. False. The young man had lost a cake of soap and a sovereign. False. Now let's answer the following questions. What made the Godspy give him a cry of surprise and anxiety? What conclusion did he jump at once? Godspy gave a cry of surprise and anxiety when he found a cake of soap near the bench fallen down over there. He immediately concluded that the young man was telling the truth and he misjudged the young man and he was feeling regret. What did Godspy do to make the amends for his earlier disbelief? To make the amends, Godspy changed his mind. After the young man, he found the young man. He was searching the young man and he found the young man and gave him the soap and some money and said him to return within the week. What was the surprise in the story for Godfrey when he returned to his seat in the park? And the surprise was that the soap was of the young man that was sitting before of the second person. Godfrey said to himself, it's lesson to me not to be too clever in judging people by circumstances. What do you think his thoughts were after he came to know that the elderly gentleman had lost a cake of soap near the bench in the park? So Godfrey said to himself, "It's lesson to me not to be too clever." But he was good. He was correct before. But when he finds the soap lying over there, he misjudged himself. He was too clever, but he was correct at the first because the soap was of the elderly person, not of that young person. He was just fooling him. Do you think that the young man made up the story on the spur of the moment at the park? Give reason to support your answer. Yes, the young man made up the story on the spur of the moment at the park because he saw the soap lying over there and he just made the story to get some money. Justify the title, The Dusk. The title, The Dusk, means the evening time. The young man and the elderly person and the Norman Godfrey was sitting in the evening time over the benches in the park. So that's all for this lesson. I hope you all like the explanation of this lesson. Thank you and have a great day.